Good morning and welcome to Hard Lens Media. My name is Kit Cavello and today I'm joined here with my special co-host Daniel Lupker. We're going over today's stories. First and foremost, our special guests will be representatives from the Northwest Side Housing Center, as well as we'll talk about stories such as how much cities spend every year, as well as the Elon Musk satellites and internet with SpaceX, Rahm Emmanuel's budget, the Cook County jail population falling down to 15%, and numerous other stories. So let's get things started first and foremost with the Emmanuel budget. So, of course, right off the bat, in a 47-3 vote, Rahm Emmanuel finally got his budget passed. And so essentially what this means for all of us in the long run is that Chicago families will be paying $1,813 more in taxes and fees in 2018 than they did before when Rahm Emmanuel took office way back in the year of 2011. So that's just an average of $174 more in taxes that will come via the package the council approved this Tuesday. So essentially, this is his 7th year crafting a budget, and Emmanuel continues to hark back to the financial problems he inherited from his predecessor, Richard M. Daley. And he's trying to justify the tough choices that he's made, most notably shutting down 50 or so schools in low-income minority communities. Now, for all of you who follow Hard Lens Media, or at least check us out on our social media page on Facebook, we've done a couple of live streams. Most notably was Tom Tresser of Chicago's Not Broke, and how he explains that our city isn't broke, it's just the TIF funds that are used to designate resources to local communities is basically being siphoned away from them, and in turn being used for the Loop as well as some more affluent North Side communities. And
it also factors in that we have private charter schools that are getting gigantic contracts that we can easily afford. So says the mayor, well, simultaneously, again, like Kit said, we're shutting down schools.
Yeah, and it's really depressing to really hear about this because he's trying to also add an additional public safety plan, which includes money to hire nearly 1,000 more additional police officers. As all of you may remember from the last two episodes, we talked about the new police academy that was used to basically, at the amount of income that's about $95 million that they used for this new police academy, and most notably when Chance the Rapper went to speak to the city council, Mayor Rahm Emmanuel walked out of that meeting, all the while ignoring Chance the Rapper's explanation and his thoughts on the fact that we have money and resources for this new police academy, yet we have $0 for our teachers and our public schools, and we can't fund them. So I don't know where Emmanuel's getting that budget money from, most notably from the TIF funds, but this is just another example of this mayor really hurting the working class people in the city of Chicago. But he's doing a good job, Daniel.
Yeah, I want to add on that. So Lauren touched on this a few weeks ago. Right now she would normally be with us, but she's still downstate. We're going to have her back next week. She'll actually have a very interesting report for us that I can't go into right now next week. But in the weeks that follow, this is something that we're going to spend a lot of time figuring out. What your budget's going to, what are you paying in your taxes, and what are you ending up with. Yeah. We have a few things that we're going to cover later in the hour that go over this in a little more detail, but it still is a similar story. If taxes go up, you don't get extra services. In fact, your services are getting cut, and once your services get cut, it's much harder for you to live, and then you're more likely to interact with that $95 million police academy.
Yeah, exactly. It depresses me for the point that here we have this great and powerful city. We have a wonderful, diverse group of people who live in Chicago, but all the while our elected officials are just screwing us over, taking away resources for our schools, our infrastructure, and this budget only benefits Mayor Rahm Emmanuel and his closest allies.
Can you give me the number of aldermen that supported this again?
Okay, again was the vote, because hold on.
It's very surprising.
Yes, so here it is, in a 47-3 vote.
So 47 out of 56% of aldermen voted this down.
Now, also, I need to let everyone understand that the all-time vote totals for Emmanuel's 7 budgets is 318 in favor and 29 against. And that's an average budget vote of 45 in favor and 4 against. So I just want all our listeners to understand really who's voting on this, why they're voting on it, and if this angers you, if you know public schools are being shut down, if you know people who live in low-income minority communities, if you're an activist, if you're politically involved and you want to really, make a change, call up your local alderman and see where they voted on this issue, because chances are your alderman voted yes on Mayor Rahm Emmanuel's budget. Now, if you're one of the few people who have, 4 representatives who voted
Do we
against
have
it,
the names of those who voted against it?
unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me, but however, what we can do is we could find, it has to be a public record, so we could check city hall records and see who voted on this.
Well, I think at this point, chances are, if you call your alderman, they voted yes. I mean, that's
Yes,
very, unless they're probably gonna, if they haven't, they're probably touting that they haven't.
Yeah,
So if you call up your alderman and say, hey, why did my alderman vote to increase my cell phone bill?
Yeah.
If you have someone that said, hey, he voted against it, you can go, oh, thanks, can I volunteer?
Yeah.
He needs help clearly because, the city, it's not just that the aldermen are voting a certain way, it's that the system makes it so that if they vote against the mayor has a huge amount of power and he can just be like, oh, you wanted something, now you're not gonna get it.
yeah, and it's once again, it's another example of absolute power, no responsibility. But let's go to another story, and Daniel, I think we were talking about this. This is in regards to how much U.S. cities spend every year on policing.
So this was a really fascinating story that I had never thought of in the terms that they were doing it. Because I always thought, oh, police, we spend a huge amount of money on police, but it's probably like, a small portion of the budget. The overall, I mean, there's so many different things that have to be done. Surely police can't be that big. I was thinking maybe 5%, 10% of the budgets are being spent on police. But looking at the numbers, that's actually only true for New York City, but they of course have an enormous economy, so that still turns out to almost $5 billion a year. And then going to Chicago, which spends $1.46 billion on policing, which is 39.6% of the general budget. That's like what the U.S. spends on the military. It's like the U.S. is like, hey, we'll put 50% towards the military. And just going down the line for Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Baltimore, Detroit, Oakland, Atlanta, Minneapolis, Orlando, they're all hovering in the Los Angeles is the low point with 25, and the high point being Oakland with 41%. This is an enormous amount of money for governments to be spending their general budget on. I'm not like, maybe I don't see the whole context in this. Maybe
Well, it's probably the war on drugs,
yeah,
the war on crime.
that's a
It's probably
ridiculous
some kind
amount of
war,
money. That's a huge percentage of the general fund.
Yeah.
That's a huge percentage. And maybe perhaps I'm not aware that they're like, hey, we'll put like lint collection and garbage collection, and then we'll do policing. That'll be the general budget. If that's the case, I apologize. But this is a lot of money to be spending our taxes on systems that, again, you're having hammers that are dealing with nails, screws, and staples. It's only going to be effective against one of them. And if we don't divert some of that money to more preventative measures, you're going to have less people the police are going to need, and you won't need as big of a police budget. It seems pretty simple.
For me, when I hear about this, to tell you the truth, it's just another example of really elected officials not understanding the true issues that are affecting communities. When you deny resources to public schools, when you shut down infrastructure, when you don't invest in local communities, and when you don't invest in a jobs program, a clear working program to help families provide for their loved ones, of course you're going to see an increase in crime. People are going to try to do what they can to survive. You're going to see an increase in a lot of horrible activities because there's zero opportunities, and when you have an elected officials who show no interest to their constituents, well, of course, there's going to be a backlash in some form or another. And the worst thing you can do is intensify the problem by having more. Look, I understand that we need to have police officers to keep the peace. We do. They're essential for our society. But at the same time, if you start militarizing the police and just constantly funding the police on this war on crimes, and this war on drugs, and a war on everything, you're going to have only more resentment. So, Daniel, you have something else to add in there?
Yeah, on this. So if you live in Chicago, which is, of course, our main audience, it's similar to other places. Actually, Chicago's not that high compared to other places. You're spending on average, if you're the average taxpayer, the median taxpayer, you're spending $537 a year paying for the police force.
Yeah.
And we have a big city, so that's a lot of money coming from, I mean, if I had a building, you could probably make a much better police. I mean, that's a lot of money for police per person. That's a huge proportion of your taxes. That's almost as much as corporate subsidies go in. I mean, maybe not even close, but that's $1,000. I mean, that's a new Xbox. That's a luxury good purchase that you are spending on police that don't have much accountability. We're spending $95 million on training, who are trained for less time than it takes a hairdresser to get a hairdressing license, who are supposed to know the jobs of de-escalation, being a lawyer, being a mediator, and defending themselves. And all we do in that 6 months is teach them how to defend themselves against any threat, imagined or otherwise.
But here's the thing I want everyone to understand, because I have a very interesting local story that's really going to kind of put like a big wrench into how much cities want to start funding police departments, because in Cook County right now, and I'm surprised to read the story, and we're going to follow through more on this because we've done a live stream in regards to bail reform some time ago in the summer, so check that live stream out. I think we also have a high definition version on our YouTube channel.
We should.
Basically what's happening now in Cook County is that the jail population is down 15% after bond reforms. So it's been 2 months since Cook County's bond system underwent some major changes, and this was done by Chief Judge Tim Evans. And he was saying basically people shouldn't be held in jail simply because they can't afford to pay the bail. For one, I support that. When people finally are actually doing the right thing, or when you have judges finally realizing, hey, we don't have to imprison people for something that they have no power over. If they can't afford to pay the bail, they shouldn't go to jail right away. I mean, you're just only making the problem that much worse for them.
It doesn't make sense to give someone who shoplifted a $100,000 bond when they make $20,000 a year.
Or less.
Or less.
Or much less than that. And so, interesting enough, we, according to Bishop James Dukes of the Liberation Christian Center, he's basically saying that the bails were not, they weren't there to help people. They were just basically ransoms. And so essentially, this really hurt a lot of people before the reforms were put in, because then they have a larger criminal record. And currently here in our country, if you have a criminal record, the chances of you getting a job or having much more opportunity, the door kind of closes on you further and further, and it's really painful for a lot of these people. So right now, I think here's one statistic that's very interesting. The Cook County jail population has gone down from nearly 7,500 to roughly 6,350. So that's a drop of 15%. And Judge Evans said that basically this saves the county money, which of course, the Cook County officials,
it
city
costs
elected
more
officials,
money to house someone in jail for a day than it does to, I forget the exact multiplier, but several school kids get the same budget as one person in jail. You're basically saying, given that it costs about $126 each day, someone is in jail. So it costs us, the taxpayers, $126 a day to keep people in jail because they can't afford to pay the bail. And that, again, if you have a huge police budget and you're arresting people, again, for stuff in a lot of cases that didn't exist, or it was, we've had a lot of times officers will arrest someone for a crime that doesn't exist. Obviously, I'm factoring out the ones that are legitimate because those obviously don't need to be counted in this. But think about that. If you are pulled over, you don't have any money, you're brought in for a crime you didn't have, let's say the police say you're drunk driving, they blow a breathalyzer, you don't come up as having any alcohol in your system, but then you somehow, you have a bad leg, you fail the field sobriety test, that stuff like that has happened, they bring you in jail, and then usually they would say, okay, well, he was a drunk driver, and your response is, I wasn't, I have proof, the breathalyzer came back negative. Well, you still gotta wait over a month, and in that time you've lost your job, you've probably lost your bill, you've probably lost your house, and as soon as you go through that system, you've still been booked. So now you've been booked, you have that on your record, and then you go through the process and they say, okay, well, if you want to prove yourself innocent, you gotta get a lawyer with money you don't have. And then with that money you don't have, they say, or you can cut a deal and we'll just say you were doing reckless driving and we'll give you a year in prison instead of 20 years for drunk driving.
Yeah.
And then so you say, well, I can't prove my case, I don't have any money, so I go in jail. Congratulations, Chicago taxpayers, you're paying $5 an hour for a whole year for one person to be in jail for a crime they didn't commit because they didn't have the money to fight it.
Now, here's something interesting that I want to bring up, because the article actually covers this very well as well. First, they of course, Cook County is scrapping for cash, and given the fact that the repeal of soda tax is going to take place in December 1st, a lot of the commissioners are stuck with a $200 million hole, which thankfully, under their brilliant guidance, they're approving Mayor Emmanuel's budget, which is going to really affect the class people.
But what the catch with the soda tax, don't forget, is the money was supposed to go to public defenders and other groups.
Yeah.
It just went to bonuses. So the holdup that's created would have already been there, and they would have probably done the same thing anyway, even with the soda tax in place.
Right. So here's the thing. According to Commissioner Larry Sufferton, he's basically saying that, look, people need to understand that governments cost money and that we need to have reasonable revenues. And unfortunately, when you create a hole, especially away from the budget process like the repeal, you're in a situation where this budget is much harder to put together. And I want everyone to understand, having an innocent person in jail, because we have a system that's called due process, innocent until proven guilty. If they can't afford to pay the bail, they shouldn't be in jail, because one, it's going to cost us more money just to keep them there. You got to feed them, you got to house them, you got to make sure that they have some, level of comfort. I'm not saying that the jails are comfortable place, but you got to at least make sure that the person is in a facility to where they're going to be safe for that time being until they deal with their court case. But having them in jail because they lack money, it's a dumb reason.
That's called a debtor's prison.
Yes, and here's the thing. Forget a soda tax, forget imprisoning people because they can't afford to pay the bail. Let's look for other clean sources of revenue that we can do. Like, look at Colorado, for example. I bring it up, I brought it up in numerous episodes. Legalize cannabis, legalize and decriminalize it, and we could start earning some revenue.
And
Colorado
you'll arrest a lot less people.
Yeah, you'll end the war on drugs, and the police will have one less thing they have to worry about. Okay? It makes so much sense. I talked this issue with independents like the Greens, Socialists, Libertarians, Democrats, and yes, even some Republicans who say end the war on drugs, legalize cannabis.
Yeah, actually, if you just ask people, not organized groups of people, politicians, etc., everyone wants legalization. It's by far and away a majority decision that's been a bit of a sea change, similar to what it was with gay marriage.
Yeah.
And so you have states that are doing this, their crime's gone down because less stuff is illegal. I mean, remember, what crimes are things that the government has determined are illegal. So if the government ceases to determine that certain things are illegal, by definition, crime goes down. And so now, Colorado's sitting on a surplus. Their police can focus on other things they're getting themselves, because the police always got to get a cut. So they're getting a nice cut of the legalization process. Less people are in jail. Oh, don't forget, if you take someone that has a job, a house, a family,
Yeah.
and that's a productive thing in society that will grow and that will add money into the coffers and won't take away as much. The second you put that in jail, everyone, the family that's left over, if the wife isn't able to work or can't work as much, then you have someone that's on welfare, which costs people money. If you have someone in jail, that costs people money. If you have to get now specialized services for the kid, that costs money. So it's a system that when it's currently done and put into effect, it just costs taxpayers money and doesn't solve the problem it's trying to solve, quote unquote, trying to solve. Because again, you don't want police to do things that they aren't able to do. Again, to hammer nail analogy. But it just seems like it's incredibly counterproductive and no one wins except a very small amount of people and politicians that like to say they put criminals away. I mean, it's not a efficient strategy. So
Yeah.
we're going to keep following this, but this is, the story of America. You're watching Hard Lens Media.